everybody. Welcome back to another edition of the Fantasy Football Expo podcast series. As always, this is Bob Lung here from the Fantasy Football Expo. And right beside me sitting is one of my favorite people. I'm going to be honest with you, folks. He saved the Fantasy Football Expo in 2021 when he said, "Hey, can I help you create a better website to keep track of this stuff?" So, ladies and gentlemen, Nate Cheatam of IDP, guys. Nate, how you doing, brother?
Good. Happy to see this happen and be part of it.
Yeah, thank you. Like you said, Nate came to me, said, "Hey, I do websites. I could probably make this run better in the back end." And the only person I think was happier when me that was my wife, because she's the one that runs this event pretty much during the weekend and needed all of these better back end tools to track people and know what's going on and who gets what. And so, Nate, thank you for helping me get to that point. And this year, that makes life a little bit easier as we head into 2022's 2023's Expo, which will be live here February 11th with tickets and everything perfect for that. But Dave, let's talk about IDP, guys. Let's first talk about you when you started your fantasy football life. When did you find out about this thing, this Dungeon and Dragons for football fans, as somebody has called it before? When did you get into fantasy football and actually started playing it? And then we'll kind of ask you about how then that leads to IDP, guys.
Gotcha. Yeah, no. Actually, an interesting story, and I've told it, quite often on my own podcast and whatnot. But really, realistically, I want to start with how I got into football. So I was not a football fan I'm getting older, so it's harder to say the majority of my life anymore because
Right.
it has been so long now. But up until about, I want to say 2008, I really didn't care for the sport. I'd watch the Super Bowl and essentially root for the commercials. So I was one of those people for a very long time until I met my best friend, John. Goes by Johnny the Greek is his handle in the fantasy community. And so I met him working at a local store in the area, and he invited me to watch football with him and his friends. And that's when I learned that football goes really well with beer, goes really well with wings, and it was very, very easy for me to get hooked.
Right.
And they were, watching the games, but doing it in such a way like, I remember like my grandfather, my uncle watching football, and they still do it to this day.
Mm-hmm.
They've got the one TV, they watch the one game, and you're just sitting there going, oh, wow, there's just a lot of downtime, like hurry up, do a play, and then, there's a lot of commercials. Well, these guys had it down pat. They had 3 TVs playing the 2 local games plus Red Zone, and then they all had computers in front of them, and they're looking at the spreadsheet thing on Yahoo, and I'm looking over and I'm like, this is just pure excitement, and then wings and beer, and everyone's looking at different TVs, yelling for different reasons, and I was so enamored by it. And I wanted to be involved. I wanted to do this all the time. And so that first season, I just watched them. I watched talk about fantasy football, talk about football. I believe this was the year that Brett Favre was in the Vikings. I knew I grew up in Michigan, so I knew who Brett Favre was from, the Packers and that kind of stuff. But I was learning something new about like why this is significant that he's, on the Vikings, and then eventually I think he went to the Jets or vice versa.
Right.
And they're getting, talking trash to each other about fake football, and I'm like, this just seems so cool. So I endured that first season, learned as much as I could, and going into that the following summer, I was like, I want to do this. They didn't have any openings in their leagues.
No.
So I had to start my own. and they all joined my league that I put together. Some help from John, who helped me fine tune the roster and the scoring. And my very first league was IDP. So
Wow.
I
Jumped right into it.
Yeah, I did not know.
Wow. And what year was this?
2008.
2008. Okay.
Yeah, 2008, 2009. And so I always kind of knew like that other side of the ball. Like you're watching both parts of the game, and you're rooting for safeties and linebackers as well as your running backs and wide receivers. And it wasn't for years that I learned that a lot of people play without defense, or they play with team defense.
Or team defense at best.
Yeah, and I remember like joining a school league, like some friends from like a English class or something in college that said, "Oh yeah, we're gonna make a fantasy football league. We're all gonna do it this year." And I joined. It was on ESPN. And they had team defense. And I was like, what is this? Like,
what
why?
Is this garbage?
Yeah. Why are we doing this?
Go on, you sissies. What are you doing?
Yeah. And so I was like, oh, I'm gonna rule this. And I ended up winning that league.
Nice.
And I'd only been I'd only been watching football for like 3 years at that point, and playing fantasy football for like 2.
Right.
It was just a matter of like being involved with this group of friends where they were so hyper focused and into it and so knowledgeable that it just kind of really washed over me. I wouldn't say that even to this day that I'm like a super knowledgeable, I'm not an analyst. I consider myself someone who props up other analysts and help them out, help them have a voice. But, put me next to someone who only watches their team and doesn't really know anything about football. And yeah, I look smart.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was my introduction to fantasy football. And, I went from one league that first year to three leagues the next year to, before I was even like doing fantasy football, Twitter and all that kind of stuff, I was in 6-7 leagues.
Nice.
That was never a stretch for me. People
Right.
talk about how, once they start writing and stuff, then they end up in like 20 leagues. I was like, I was doing that before I was writing and
before it was cool.
Yes. So
love it. So obviously, I think the question now has been answered, but let's go to it. So you are the IDP guys, obviously well known for your IDP genre and your expertise across the board. Obviously, the fact that you jumped into it feet first from the get-go certainly speaks to that. But talk about what helped you make that decision to, you know what? I think I'm good enough at this stuff that I think I can help share knowledge, get people to help write this stuff, and put out a very good quality product, which you do, and one of the best for IDP out there. Talk about the creation of the IDP guys, and even, if you want to just expound on what makes you different from maybe other sites who sprinkle in IDP. Maybe there is a few others out there that are a full IDP, but you guys bring it the best for sure.
Yeah, so just like how I got into fantasy football, this story starts with my best friend John and me. So a little history on me is, I went through college for journalism for a number of years. I had this idea of becoming like an investigative journalist and like hard news. And, there's, TV shows like The Newsroom and essentially, that like dramatic, like being all about like getting the story and stuff. And I always thought sports journalism was like, those are just people playing with news and stuff.
Right.
And so I was in my school newspaper. I started a newspaper in my local community, and I just, I was in that world, and then I kind of had a shift where like it was around 2016. I just kind of fell out of love with it. And with, what I liked with football and everything, I decided to start writing. I was listening to podcasts like pretty regularly, and I listened to this Detroit Lions podcast, and that was literally what it was called. And they had a call. They said, like, we're putting together a team of writers. We're going to do, more for our website and everything. And, I had a background in journalism, had a background with editing and websites. So I joined up with them and got about 2 years under my belt, helping them out, getting kind of into that football journalism world. And I moved in with my best friend. It was him, myself, and, soon to be my future wife. And we just like talked football all the time. It was constantly, talking about football, talking about our teams. And I was looking at, this Lions podcast, what they were doing. And I was like, I could see that being fun. It was never about me thinking I could advise anyone on anything. Right. In reality, I always thought people were just smarter than me, in this sense, like, right. But I thought, hey, we would take car rides and go to like a friend's place or whatever. And so easily 30 minutes in the car and we're just yapping about football. I was like, what if we recorded this? What if we just started a podcast of our own? So we just kind of started recording it, and it was terrible.
It was terrible.
It was absolutely like we had no idea how to build segments. We would talk about like everything that they say don't do in a show, like where you talk about, how was your week for like 20 minutes at the beginning. That's what we started off doing. And Johnny would even read from the Cowboys book, Boys Will Be Boys. We tried to be funny, with our show. And so we have this terrible sense of humor where it's like poop jokes and like all that kind of stuff. So he would read from this book like a couple paragraphs from, whatever outlandish thing some cowboy did back in the 90s. I can't remember who it was, but he ripped a hole in the roof. It was like a convertible with like a cloth top. He cut a hole in it and defecated into one of the cars of like his coaches. Like,
sounds like Randy White, but
that probably was who it was. And so this was our show. This is what we were doing. And it was like, we're going to refine, but we're going to keep doing this for as long as it's fun. And that show went for almost 200 episodes.
Oh, wow. Congratulations. That's awesome.
Yeah. And it built. So the first year was just the podcast. The second year, I thought, we were just putting this out on, I think back then it was on Podbean. So it was going to like Apple and Google. And I was like, we should probably put our episodes like on a website. I know how to build those. Like, why am I doing that? So initially our website was just going to be a place for our episodes. And I was at that point talking to Tyler Gee from Fantasy Football Franchise back when that was still a thing. And him and I kind of hit it off and was helping him edit for his site. And I just kind of mentioned to some of the staff there that I was going to build this site. And, if they wanted to write an article or write about IDP, at that point, there wasn't a whole lot out there.
Right. No, right.
Like
Definitely.
Content. And I was like, maybe we put out a couple of articles a month or something. I can't pay you, but, if you want to do it, let's do it. Well, that first year, we put out almost articles daily.
Wow.
And it was, we were just seeing, taking in anyone that wanted to write. There was a lot, like we had a whole team that came out of nowhere.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And I was never expecting it. And we even discovered Joey the Tooth. He's for whatever reason in IDP, everyone has like almost mafia names. Like,
It snows there. Jimmy
yeah,
the Greek, Johnny the Tooth.
right. So everyone seems to have these names, and so Joey, he's local to here. He put out some content just in Twitter threads, and I reached out to him and I said, "Hey, like, are you interested in being a writer?" And he stuck with us for like, I want to say 4 years before being hired on at Football Guys
Nice.
this
Good for him.
past year. So, along the way, we've helped a few people advance their careers. Sam Lane, who was the Scott Fishbowl winner that year, that was our first year. He was part of our staff. And
That's Stompy, right?
yeah, Stompy.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so that was like the first time I heard about Scott Fishbowl was that season. I don't think I was in it, or I might have been. I can't remember. It's so long ago, and I've at this, not to toot my own horn, but I've been in so many of them at this point. But yeah, so that year he won. So that kind of, and his name was on his title, or our name was on his title.
Right, on IDP Guys, right.
It kind of like lifted up a little bit, and over the course of 4 or 5 years, we just kept growing and creating more content, membership program, platform, everything, and monetizing. And now it's a company that makes money.
Yeah, no, and that's, you don't get still not a lot of those out in the fantasy football world. So congratulations on that. And like I said, anybody out there who's thinking about getting into an IDP league, or this is the spot to go to for sure. So, all right, so let's talk about the Expo. Your first year was last year with you also obviously were very ingrained to it, as you helped me. We built the website together, and you were a big part of helping us through the weekend and these last couple of years. And but talk about your experience as an exhibitor, sponsor, and some of the things that you've seen, growth. Obviously, we know we've been growing, but just, I kind of, so I also was interviewing Jorge, and, I said to him, what has changed, but also what has remained the same in the Expo the last couple of years.
Yeah. So my first year was, I think it was 2021. So I've been there two times now. Going into the first year, I did not know what to expect. I ended up opting for a VIP booth because, I'd been to these type of things before. So I was like, VIP booth got to be better,
Right.
I wanted to come in and show up for the IDP community.
Right.
That was something that I felt, especially with the fact that, we were making revenue from our site, to use that to kind of buoy the IDP community. Obviously this isn't everyone, but everywhere. It's not like we're making some global impact or anything. Right. But in the sense of like, if this is a microcosm of like, in some senses, like fantasy football Twitter, or the overall fantasy football community, I wanted there to be an IDP something front and center.
Right.
And that's what we tried to be. And when we came into that, I was just had an investor who's local to Canton. He's got a printing company. And so we decided, not only are we going to have the VIP booth, but we're going to deck this thing out. We're going to go all out. And we did a background banner, a table banner, and we had a pop-up and all of this other stuff. And I would say that we had the best booth that year.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Everybody talked about your booth, and, oh my gosh, it's awesome. And look at the banners, and it was so cool. And it was amazing. I will admit that for sure.
Yeah. So we just tried to kind of really, wow everybody. We gave away a couple jerseys, and then I worked with you on setting up an IDP panel.
Mm-hmm.
So I was part of that, invited in Fantasy in Frames and Gary Davenport to talk, and we packed that room, which was absolutely amazing for, talking about IDP, which,
Right.
some people say, they'll never play that, kind of. So it's growing, but yeah, that first year it was overwhelming. It was a lot. I have a certain salesmanship to myself, and I felt like I was definitely like on that
Yeah.
whole time, and then going into the second year, I felt like, yeah, it grew. Things that were different was it just kind of felt a little more like, it was like the first year was like, there's a lot of excitement, there's a lot of stuff, but it was still like new, fresh, and like kind of like not fully defined. By the second year, it was like, okay, now this is starting to establish. We're seeing people year over year. So you're walking into a room, and my first year, I was, hey, who are you? Like,
Right.
kind of meeting people the first time, and the second year, it's like, okay, we're going over there. I got to talk to these guys because I saw them last year at this thing. I got to go over here because, I have to talk to these people, like bouncing around probably even more the second year. And I would imagine this year it's going to be more of that, like,
right.
Even to the point of like, going outside of like the, what was it, the DoubleTree bar, and like meeting people at different places and expanding into Canton a little bit more. And then obviously we had way more staff the second year, so it became almost like a get together for us too.
Right.
Where we were able to have some team bonding.
Yeah, and that's I've noticed that's becoming more and more common now. As football guys has their kind of, hey, everybody come, and they take them out to dinner, on Friday night, and then come over to the Centennial Plaza afterwards. But it's kind of like their annual meeting now. So all, they get 20 of them to come in town, which, is awesome. And I truly thank Joe Bryan and everybody from them. But, you do it. I think the Fantasy Headliners, pretty much their whole team, Trophy Smack. I mean, so many of these companies now are seeing this as a, hey, let's not only go and promote our business, but let's also kind of get together once a year, and this will be it. And we do it in Canton, and, Canton is not that exciting outside of the football stuff, but, it's still pretty exciting for that stuff. So a lot to do and a lot of stuff going on. So, as we're heading into this year, I mean, Nate, you're one of the few that when I interview, you already know everything that's already going on. We're going to be going to the Dome for the Expo itself. We're going to do block party outside of the Dome and down the street from the stadium, and the sports book's going to be there on Saturday night, and Friday night at Centennial. So again, lots going to be the same, but there's going to be some different stuff this year. But we had to move to a bigger place. I mean, we went from just one floor of the hotel to 2 floors of the hotel, and we pretty much outgrew both of them. And any growth at all was going to push us just over the board and probably fire marshal problems if we did.
Yeah.
So now going to the Dome, we can bring in 3,000 people in there and still have plenty of room. So we're looking forward to that. Definitely want to make it more family oriented this year. So bring the spouses, bring the kids, Saturday night party. Everybody who's there gets to ride the zip lines and the Ferris wheel for free. It's part of the package. Come to the Expo on Sunday in the Dome. The entire field will be open to toss footballs around, and we'll probably have like the quarterback skills challenge stuff up, and can play out there on the field so the kids can run around and have fun, and dad and mom can go check out all their favorite fantasy sites and go to their favorite panels and learn about whether it's IDP or Dynasty or redraft, whatever the case may be. So we're really excited for 2023, and as I've mentioned to many others already before, and who knows what's going to happen, because how many times last year were you and I working on some, the next thing you know, oh, look, FFPC has given us a free $2,000 entry to give away. And, this company is putting in that we can put into the panel, and it's just one thing after another. And that's what's so much fun, is that it's all flexible. We do what we want. So if somebody wants to add something, we came up with the cornhole games, and we came up with the flag football and the quarterback skills challenge. And, like somebody said, man, if you're bored during this weekend, you got a problem. You really should not be bored. It's people are trying to expand it without the football part. I mean, there's guys talking about coming in a day early on Thursday and having a golf outing. And, you know, somebody talked about playing pickleball this year, which is now my new favorite sport. So it's just, you know, that's what's so much fun about this, is this community is just coming together. They just love this. You know, a lot of guys are coming in Thursday through Monday, making a 5-day weekend out of it. That's awesome. I mean, the hotels are all fired up. We got 12 hotels to choose from this year, including the DoubleTree. And you don't need to stay at the DoubleTree necessarily, because the Expo is not at the DoubleTree. So, yeah, it's a benefit for Friday night, but you're going to have to go up to the Hall of Fame, and the other hotels around the area are just as close. So if you get blocked out of the the DoubleTree, don't sweat it. There's a lot of good hotels, and you'll still be 5-10 minutes away from everything. So, Nate, what plans do you have for IDP guys and everybody? You got any new ideas, new concepts, new things, or you still kind of have it in, you know, working on it at this point for 2023?
So we're working on it. We're trying to figure out how to best optimize, you know, there's a sales to it. You know, we're trying to make sure that we're reaching people that want to learn about IDP and learn about us. We love doing giveaways. Last year we gave away like 12 or 15 different things.
Nice.
And we want it to be exciting and pull people into our booths. I know that this year, I think there's an expansion where we're going to get access to like a social area, where we've got plans for having one of our guys there kind of planted to speak to more people. But we're also very much considering there's a whole business to business aspect of the Expo, because when we come in, we're not only looking to talk to fans, but we're also looking to talk to other fantasy sites to see how can we align, like what can we do to work together. And interesting enough, like last year, FTN was right next to us. And we ended up making a deal with them for their data only because of the conversation that we had at their table as myself and the other co-owner walked through. And so, you know, this year it's very much like we're dedicated to go and talk to everybody, utilizing the parties to kind of network and all of seeing what business opportunities are out there. And kind of that's our main like strategy. For me, I'm probably going to be one of those power people where I've got a family vacation that was supposed to kind of butt right up to the Expo, but got pushed back a week. So it's straddling that July-August line. So it's looking like I'm going to be in Canton for a whole week before the Expo.
Oh my!
Working, you know, just
right.
Because it just doesn't make sense for me to go home and fly in. So I'll just stay and stay until Monday. And I love it. You know, obviously, you know, you're there, Keith's there, Grant. I know a lot of people in Canton, so it's not like it's dull or boring or anything. And there's just so much to get ready for in anticipation. I'm looking forward to another crack at the football guys poker tournament.
Right? Yeah.
I made it almost to the final table. Howard Bender knocked me out just maybe 20 minutes before the final table was established. So, and that's the cool thing about it, is like all of these events, you go there, like I would never have expected to have like a inside joke or an inside thing with Howard Bender, you know, someone that like I turned my radio on and there he is talking, and the whole weekend, like the nicest guy in the world. We would joke about it every time we kind of like pass by each other, because he ended up getting knocked out like a few hands after me. But it was like, you know, these interactions and things with people that you would just never expect. And really kind of get a look behind the veil.
Well, one of the things we forgot to bring up, and I definitely want to do that before we get out of here, is the exciting thing. So we're adding some new Kings Classics this year. After starting in 2018 with the traditional, we had 24 the first year. We went to 40. No, we went to 28 the next year. We went to 2 leagues of 14, then went to 42. But this year we're adding 2 new ones. We're adding not only a Queens Classic, which will be all female league, which is awesome, but you and Gary Davenport and Mike Woolard are putting together the IDP Kings Classic to go along with John Lobb's College King Classic that started 2 years ago. Talk about the new exciting IDP League, Kings Classic, and some of the guys you are trying to get in to be a part of this.
Yeah, so this one is something where we were discussing it after last season, and Gary and I were just like, we need to do this. He really wanted to make it happen, and I was all about it. I was looking at different ways that we could kind of incorporate IDP and have like drafts going on, because I went to draft night out 2 years ago and fell in love with in-person drafting.
Right.
And that was, they didn't have IDP. It was on Fantrax. Like, it wasn't like the perfect thing for me, but I just enjoyed that atmosphere. And so this really, when we were talking about it, it was trying to make that perfect, draft and all of that stuff. And so Gary and I have been putting things together. I will say it's mainly been him, so I really want to give him the credit for a lot of this. He is the godfather of IDP for a reason. Right. But, talking with some people from Football Guys, we're trying to hit, really the goal of this is to get as many of the big name brands involved, right. But also leave room for the smaller brands. I know RPO football, just kicked off like a couple weeks ago. So Leo was invited. There's, I'm trying to remember, there's some people that were trying to get, like John Macri from PFF. And then John Norton, I believe it is, from Football Guys.
Okay.
He's going to be part of it, but it's just like a healthy mix and trying to, the big thing about this is it's going to be so long,
Well, at least you guys are only doing one draft. So you've got 6 hours. We take 6 hours. We go 10 to 4. So with our 2 drafts back to back. So trust me, you got plenty of time. You're only doing one, even though it might take you 2-3 hours to get through.
Yeah. So we're going to do full team. So it'll be like 22 starters.
Wow. That's amazing.
Because we'll do the offense and we'll do the defense. We're working through the roster construction now in a way that, when you talk about like football defenses, you talk about like how the secondary might be shifting. You might have more cornerbacks or more safeties, or your front line. There's like the 4-3-3-4, where you have like maybe one defensive tackle, 2 DEs, or 2 defensive tackles and 2 DEs. We're going to try and account for all that. So if you are you can have multiple strategies and essentially have more defensive ends, more defensive tackles. Like, we're going to figure out the edge situation, which, Gary is very adamant that we're finally going to make true position a standard in MFL, which if it happens, it's going to be revolutionary to the whole IDP industry.
Good stuff. Yeah.
And so hopefully this will be something we'll be able to add in. And then from the scoring perspective, it's massively balanced to the point that, your top linebackers, your top players on defense should also be pretty close to your top players on offense. Right. And boosting up cornerbacks and defensive tackles so that they're relevant,
Right.
And it's the good players that are getting that boost. So, right. It matters to roster a defensive tackle or a cornerback, or stream them and have multiple options going.
Right.
So it'll be very interesting. It'll be very challenging just from the roster and the scoring construction, but then we're going to put in all of the big names. So the competition is just going to be
right. Well, that's what it's about. It's supposed to be the best of the best. So I'm
Yeah.
sure you guys are going to go out and certainly try to find all the best of the best to be there. So cool. Really excited about that. I mean, I don't do a lot of IDP, but obviously I've learned a lot from you guys over the past and know that it's a very intense niche out there. So appreciate that. So Nate, once again, thank you so much for being on. Really appreciate you being a part of this expo for the last couple of years, and obviously very instrumental in the great website that we have. So tell everybody where they can find you and your folks at IDP, guys.
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at Nate Cheat. I don't publish a whole lot of football content anymore. I'm kind of mainly focus on, websites and that kind of advice. If you do need advice for your websites, come to me. I do I generally will freely give out consulting advice at this point. But if you're interested in IDP, go to idpguys.org. Follow our account at IDP Guys. And I highly recommend signing up for a subscription. We're making a lot of improvements over the next couple weeks. But if you play in IDP leagues, our rankings are the deepest available. We rank 700 to 1,000 players all mixed together, so you can, win your leagues at the draft, essentially.
Perfect. Definitely perfect. All right. Thank you again, Nate. Of course, I'm at Bob_Lung on Twitter. Follow the Expo at the FF Expo on Twitter, thefantasyfootballexpo.com on the web. Of course, right now, just go in. If you haven't put in your email address to get notification of when we'll open up the tickets, which will be February 11th. So don't forget that. That'll be out there soon. So now you can sign up, at least be there and be ready to get that email. And once we do that, boom, the explosion will start. So Nate, thanks again for being here. Everybody take care. God bless. We'll talk to you soon. Do you want to continue to learn more about the Fantasy Football Expo? Well, then subscribe to our channel so you don't miss an episode. Expo registration is now open, so make sure you visit thefantasyfootballexpo.com to get your tickets now. And come and experience fantasy football's greatest weekend in Canton, Ohio this August 11th through the 13th.